Hello, JALTCALL podcast listeners. This is Geoff Carr coming to you from the wilds of Hokkaido. We have a treat for you today. JALTCALL's own Robert Dykes and I are here visiting at Hokkaido JALT 2025. Brick Zeff and Michael Mielke have been incredibly welcoming and supportive, giving us some space to record the interview, which I'm just about to introduce. And Sean Hoggard also saved us with some tech help, an adapter that helped us get our mics all straightened out. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce JALTCALL Podcast's first interview with Louise Ohashi. Louise is the keynote speaker here, and she's also giving a workshop on using ChatGPT and other generative AI in the classroom. Enjoy. Hello, JALTCALL podcast listeners. We are here at the JALT Hokkaido Winter Language Teaching Conference. Our guest this morning is Dr. Louise Ohashi at Gakushuin University, specializing in second language acquisition, AI, language education of all kinds. Her key research, well, everybody knows that, and she's going to tell that story much better than I can. She is the EUROCALL AI SIG chair. We are happy to have her here this morning to talk about her keynote and workshop that she's going to be giving today, about EUROCALL itself, and about developments in AI in language education as they have been happening in the last couple of years and as she sees them going to be happening over the next few. Louise, welcome.
Okay, thanks for the warm welcome in a very cold place.
Sapporo has gotten some snow lately, and it's probably a little bit cooler here than you're used to.
Yes, and much cooler than I'll be next week when I return to Australia.
Oh, my. Where is it in Australia you're from, Louise?
Melbourne, down in the south, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, well, you do get a little bit of cool weather down there, right?
We do, but not snow.
Okay, that's true. And it is summer there right now.
It is.
Fall?
It is. It's summer, the tail end.
Oh, okay, so you're going to be hitting the beach a lot is what you're saying.
That's the plan.
All right. That is excellent. Okay, we are here. We are chattering a little bit. Robert Dykes is next to me, being as quiet as I have ever seen him.
I'm trying. Well, let's record that.
All right. The conference theme here at Hokkaido JALT, Louise, is tools for the classroom, or for classroom teaching.
Yeah.
And you are presenting directly on that. You've been using an awful lot of that's going on. Teaching tools in the classroom. Your keynote is ChatGPT as a tool for L2 education. Mm-hmm. And your workshop title is Building AI Literacy Through Exploration. Can you give us a preview of what you're going to be talking about today?
Sure. The keynote is really looking at research that I've conducted. And I did a study really quite soon after ChatGPT was released with a co-researcher, Anthony Alm. Her and I knew immediately this was going to be a game changer. And so we got our study together for teachers and we captured their initial response in the first 8 to 10 weeks post-release of ChatGPT so that we'd have something to look back on later as it was adapted and adopted into the system, the L2 education system. And there were 367 teachers from 48 different parts of the world that participated in that study. Fast forward to July last year, I did a study that replicated parts of that to get the student perspective, and I added in extra questions to find out how students were actually using ChatGPT and their thoughts on teacher use and their thoughts on integration into the L2 education system. And there were over 2,500 students from universities in Japan, and I looked at English and other language usage. And so I'll be sharing some results of that, looking at some parts where student and teacher views overlapped, some parts where they were somewhat different, and sharing some real life experiences of students and their use of ChatGPT.
That sounds really fascinating, Louise. Now, when you discussed the study that you did with educators, you were talking about it being from 40-something different countries around the world.
That's right.
Whereas when you discussed the students, you referenced students in Japan,
right,
but not others. Now, I know that you're active in EUROCALL and, of course, CALL here in Japan. Those two different perspectives, it can't be easy to compare single student single country
Right.
student perspectives to those of teachers in many different places. How do you square that circle?
Well, actually, there's a subsample of in the teacher study. There was a subsample of almost half of the teachers that were based in Japan, and that's thanks to my JALT networks. So I can draw some comparisons between the Japanese subsample of teachers and the Japanese university students here. So that's how I address that.
Okay, that's interesting. Robert, you have anything?
No, for once.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting that I'll do in the keynote is look at some of the pedagogical implications of having this information. So knowing what students are actually doing and looking at some of the kind of ideas that teachers had about what students might use ChatGPT for in the future, or their fears, their concerns as well. By looking at that and understanding students' perspectives, we can try to address this new technology armed with that knowledge,
Right.
if you like. And in the latter part of that first keynote session, I'll look at some practical use options that we have with ChatGPT. Whereas in the workshop, building AI literacy, it's not just ChatGPT that we're looking at. I think of ChatGPT just as like a gateway tool because so many of the things that we do with it are transferable, and it's also integrated into so many of the other tools that we use these days. But you can really overload people if you just start bombarding them with 10 tools in a session, and it can be really difficult to keep up. And the same goes for students in your courses. We don't want tech overload.
Exactly.
So my kind of approach is to take one tool, show you how versatile it can be, point out some of the limitations and affordances, and then look at how we could transfer some of those things over to other tools, which might be preferable for your context.
That sounds incredibly interesting, and I do want to come back to the practical side of things, but I'd like to touch on EUROCALL before we go on any further. How many years have you been the AI SIG chair at EUROCALL now?
The AI SIG started 3 years ago, and I was there from the start. Yeah,
Okay.
so we are just heading into it started online basically because we were still kind of in pandemic times. So we had our first face-to-face meeting in Iceland, and then last year in Slovakia.
Right.
So in Milan, we'll be having our third face-to-face.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Last year in Slovakia was truly amazing. We had a great time there and so many incredible sessions from people. We had quite a few attendees from JALT.
Right. Yeah, as we do each year. And anybody who knows my background here in Japan will know that I was really involved with JALTCALL for quite a number of years. JALTCALL was how I got involved with JALT. I went to a JALTCALL conference in Fukuoka back in, I think it was 2014 or 15, something like that. And some of the officers at the time talked to me about being a member at large. And I thought, oh, that sounds really dodgy. At large sounds like I'm on the run. Like, okay, that's for me. And so anyway, I got involved, and that little by little, by taking on small tasks, I ended up being the publicity officer, and then later the program chair, helping with the conference. And I kind of stepped from that into the board of directors role, organizing JALT's international conference in 2017 and 2018 with the team of people that are involved to get that great event, happening. Because it's truly, maybe people don't realize how many people are involved.
Hundreds.
Like so many people.
Literally, from the vetting to the chair.
It's just incredible, the amount of dedication from
200
people, right? It's just a massive, massive team. But, that was through JALTCALL. But after maybe, 10 years-ish, I started thinking that I'd like to get more outside perspectives and bring them back. And for a long time, I had wanted to build stronger bonds between EUROCALL and JALTCALL. And JALTCALL members can go to the EUROCALL conference.
Right. We have the mutual recognition
Exactly.
membership to attend the conferences,
Exactly.
which really makes a big difference.
It makes a difference. It really does. And so I wanted to build stronger bonds, but it's very difficult for a lot of EUROCALL members to come to JALTCALL because of the timing of the conference, whereas for us, it's quite easy to go to their conference. And then eventually I thought, well, if I was involved in an officer position there, that might be a very good bridge.
That is a great into what I'd like to ask you about now. How do you see the difference between what many of your colleagues in EUROCALL are experiencing with this AI boom we're in right now versus what's happening here in Japan?
I think
Speed
it's
of change, the current state.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult for me to gauge because EUROCALL members are based in so many different countries and their contexts vary a lot more than the typical JALTCALL member.
Of course.
Because there's a certain sense of familiarity here in JALTCALL where even though we might be in like a private or a public university, or we might be in a high school, or we're still in the same Japanese context. So we can see some similarities. And typically using it for English, whereas over in Europe it's different. They're using it for other languages as well, and they are governed by different kinds of privacy restrictions and so forth. So I remember the first AI SIG meeting that I held, one of the big topics was privacy, whereas that's not something that immediately came up in Japan.
And Korea has really strong laws about like AI privacy that are already in the books.
Yeah.
Really strong. And they hit those fast. In Japan, I haven't heard anything.
Well, Italy banned ChatGPT outright at the beginning, countrywide ban. And that was over issues of, for example, they have restrictions on content for, I think it was until 13 years old, but they had no way of checking people's age. So Italy stamped down on that and said, well, if you can't enforce that, you can't actually have that in our country. And so, when you have countries that are taking an immediate stance against something over privacy issues or content restrictions from the beginning, of course, that has implications in the way teachers view a tool.
Of course.
And so in Japan, there really wasn't anything like that. And we don't have the, in Europe, they have the European AI Act, I think it's called. They have legislation, whereas in Japan, it's pretty lax. So these are some of the background issues that affect our adoption of new technologies.
At the beginning of, or when ChatGPT debuted, I think you were still at Meiji University at that time, just at the very beginning, or you were already at Gakushuin?
Gosh.
It was 2020.
Yeah. When ChatGPT came out in 2022, it was November. Yeah, I think I was just starting at Gakushuin. It must have been my first year. Yeah.
All right. So you've had the opportunity to see at least one university's way of dealing with AI. I was hoping that it was two in this case.
No,
but
it's one.
What do you see? What kind of ethical guidelines does your university have? Are there any procedural limitations or university governance?
The typical guidelines that universities have here, because so MEXT put out some guidelines, which I will show in a session today, for universities and technical colleges. And typically, they have pointed out uses of AI that are possible, and then they've said to institutions that it's your responsibility to make guidelines appropriate for your institution. And so, of course, institutions, they have so many courses and they have so many possible purposes for uses of these technologies. So they can't make a blanket statement that isn't vague, basically.
Right.
And so typically on university websites, you'll find an AI statement, a generative AI statement and usage policy for students. And it'll generally tell them, contact your teacher, find out what you're allowed to do, find out what you're not allowed to do. And that's good and well if teachers know what to do.
Right.
But that's where the issue is, right? Because teachers haven't had training. There's a lot of upskilling that needs to happen. And actually, Phil Hubbard and I have just written a chapter on AI ethics. And one of the things that we mention is that there's this need for upskilling and ongoing professional development for teachers. But where does this come from?
The connection that you see between upskilling and ethics, that was an interesting little zigzag right there. How do you see those connecting?
Well, it's not very ethical to put decisions about academic future of students into the hands of teachers who don't actually know what to choose, what decisions to make. No, you have for example, when ChatGPT first came out, there was a professor over in a university in Texas, and he used ChatGPT to check if student work had been produced by ChatGPT. And that's something ChatGPT can't actually tell him.
No.
And he failed students and they couldn't graduate. Their graduation was withheld. Imagine that you're a student and you get this kind of notification and your future's in jeopardy. I mean, this is problematic. And he just lacked the basic information that he would need to make the decision about that. And so
we also have administrators making rules, right? Like some of these ethics boards are made up with teachers, but some are made up by administrators that don't have classroom experience, or they can't even, imagine how it might or might not be used.
Right, exactly. And from the other perspective, how I see it is related to ethics is that this is a workplace skill that's needed. And you can't expect staff to just spend their time and money getting the skills they need to do their job without support. There needs to be funding put aside for professional development. If universities or high schools or whichever teaching context, if they don't have people qualified in their institution to provide the kind of guidance that teachers need, then they need to be outsourcing this and having someone with those skills come in. It's also like thinking from the point of view of ethics in terms of student access to teachers who have these skills. If you're a student who has a teacher who knows about all of this stuff and can guide you, or you're a student in another class that has a teacher who's not going to prepare you at all, what is your knowledge level and skill level when you graduate? And are you prepared for the workforce that's outside?
Right. I'd like to pick up on this point here, Louise, because I think we could talk about ethics and AI
for hours.
For hours, right? Hours. And Phil and I did.
Right. And I feel like we still have more to do and more to go on. There's a recent preprint that has been released by a combined team from Carnegie Mellon and Microsoft Research. Okay. It's not going to be presented until next month.
Okay.
I'd like to read you part of the conclusion that they have here have you comment on it.
Yep.
When using Gen AI tools, the effort invested in critical thinking shifts from information gathering to information verification. From problem solving to AI response integration, and from task execution to task stewardship. Knowledge workers face new challenges in critical thinking as they incorporate Gen AI into their knowledge workflows. To that end, our work suggests that Gen AI tools need to be designed to support knowledge workers' critical thinking by addressing their awareness, motivation, and ability barriers. So this is specifically addressing potential deficits that may arise from not necessarily overuse, but inappropriate use or untrained use of Gen AI.
Right. Yeah, and this actually makes me think about another chapter in the book. So I just mentioned that Phil and I had written a chapter on AI ethics, and that's a book that's coming out in the Gen AI series in Canlin and Maynard. And Robert is also an editor on that book. Yeah. And in one of the chapters on pragmatics, there is a case reported where one of the authors had attended a training session for teachers, and the trainer had said that it was okay to use generative AI for the lesson planning. And these are pre-service teachers involved in the training course. And the author said, well, if you're at the point of being a pre-service teacher and you don't have the skill of creating a lesson plan yourself first, it's not really the appropriate time for this. And the comparison was, well, it's like using a calculator before you know how to do math.
We were talking about that last night. Like, it's fine for us to use ChatGPT for brainstorming a paper because we have that ability.
Right.
And we can gauge what information to reject, accept or change. But right, like what you're saying is if somebody doesn't have that pre-training, then they don't know if the information they're getting.
Yeah, if we skip steps. It's...
That's what I'm worried about the students, though. Like
right.
when, we can't skip steps with the students.
Right. And that's why I think that we, as a profession, we teachers need training because we will know how to guide students appropriately if we know how to do it.
Yeah.
And so we need to think always of the purpose of the task that we're doing. I mean, this is just another tool, like everything. It's like a textbook.
Yeah.
That it's like any tool that we've used. It just has different affordances and different things we need to be careful with. But we still always have to consider what is the purpose of using this tool.
Our mindset seems like it is an extremely important thing going into this. Robert, as you were saying, looking at what the output is from Gen AI without verification is a real problem. As instructors, as researchers, we're in the habit of verification.
Right.
Adam Grant at Wharton is an organizational psychologist. He talks about people having generally 3 default mindsets. The preacher who's saying, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. The prosecutor who is constantly saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And of course, the politician who's, I think whatever you think. What do you think? That. Whereas as researchers, we have to be different. And in the habit of verification, this isn't something which people are generally used to on a daily basis. But to effectively use Gen AI, it seems to me like we need to get better at defaulting into that mode of thinking.
Right. And knowing where to verify information. Even in earlier studies with machine translation, there are studies that show that students who were using multiple sources to check the output were more skillful in what they're producing. Like if they were leaving the machine translation application and going to check Google Images, or if they were leaving it and choosing another type of machine translation and verifying the parts that they had a question mark in their mind over. And we need to do that as well with Gen AI. But the question is where to go for that information. And if students and teachers, we teachers too, if there's not that basic digital literacy skill there, then you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to know where to go for that extra information, and you might just believe it without thinking. So, it's definitely something that we need to be aware of and address. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. We are beginning to run out of time here. Robert, I wanted to see if you had a question you wanted to pursue.
I do. I have one last question because Louise has a huge understanding and overview of kind of Gen AI in Japan, and due to her work with EUROCALL, kind of the worldview. So it's. I'm going to try to say this without leading it. It's fairly well known that Japan is falling behind in AI. So like the Stanford 2024 AI report came out, and Japan is like ranked 8th or 9th in the world with, awareness, with private investment. Pretty much every metric that they measured, Japan is at the bottom. So what do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing? Like, what are your feelings about this with Japan and AI, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, with Japan and its attempt at internationalization, I was always thinking to myself, gosh, why is it so hard? Yeah, but when the pandemic came, that saved the education system. Australia really suffered because there are a lot of international students that couldn't get there, and then the system fell apart, lots of job losses. In Japan, I don't know. I mean, we're still at the cusp of change, aren't we? And I think that there are a lot of benefits to AI, but over-reliance on it is also going to be problematic, like we found with international students within higher education. Exactly. So I don't think that we need to be grabbing the technology and racing ahead. A cautious approach can be beneficial, but we don't want to get left behind either. And that's the kind of difficult part, right? Finding that balance, not shunning the technology, but not integrating it into every single thing that you have.
In call, it's so easy because we tend to want to try out all the latest tools and introduce them to our students, but over-reliance is the other side.
Well, exactly.
Louise, it's really been a pleasure talking with you today. And Rob, thank you for sitting in as well. As a wrap up right now, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. First, a book or resource that you have been using lately that you'd recommend to people who are interested in learning more about AI in education?
Okay, one that I found really informative is called Generative AI and Education. The subtitle is Digital Pedagogies, Teaching Innovation and Learning Design. And that was published through Springer. It covers some basic concepts, but it also includes some ideas that I hadn't thought about before. So it was informative even for me with my background in this area, but also written in a style that was quite accessible. So if you don't have a very big background in this area, you'd still find it useful, I believe.
Well, that sounds outstanding. That was great. Thank you. And another question. There is a podcast in Japan called Disrupting Japan, a person who covers entrepreneurship in Japan. At the end of each of his podcasts, he asks the interviewee a magic wand question.
Okay.
If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about language education in Japan or AI implementation in language education in Japan, what would you choose and why?
What would I change? Looking back, I think that my wish would have been for the hardware, because often there were issues with that. But these days, that seems to be there increasingly. So it's still kind of on the wish list where we don't have it, but less so. I think now the wish list is more for the knowledge and the skills. And so we need to be able to have opportunities to come together and have discussions. And there's not a lot of space for that. In my environment at the university level, there are a lot of part-time teachers who are working in multiple institutions and passing like ships in the night.
That is such a good point.
So how can you have those very necessary discussions?
That's extremely true. Thank you. That's great. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us today when you were busy yesterday at the PySig conference and busy again today. And yet you've taken this time to talk with us for JALTCALL podcast, Louise. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Louise.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. And we look forward to hearing you today and interviewing you again. Also, I'd like to plug our collaboration between the AI SIG and EUROCALL and JALTCALL later in March. I don't think we've set an exact date yet, but from JALTCALL, Judy Wang and her collaborators are going to be discussing using generative AI for writing evaluation in a new platform that they're creating at Waseda. And Louise, I think you'd mentioned that Chris Fry from EUROCALL is going to be presenting.
That's right. And he's going to be helping with speaking skills, something very practical for teachers.
Oh, that sounds outstanding. Chris is going to be giving a workshop.
That's right.
Okay. And I believe Judy's going to choose a presentation. So everyone who's listening, we'd love to have you join us.
Yeah. And there's going to be a section in this webinar where teachers can talk together about their own use of AI as well. So a my share, if you like, and a chance to actually have some discussions too. So
that's what's really important, I think, to keep the discussion going between colleagues. Yeah, stuff like that. Just don't stop doing it either. Yeah, it's good that you're doing that.
Absolutely. It would be great. Well, thank you so much for that. And we are going to see you and record you again soon because you have very graciously agreed to participate in the JALTCALL forum at PanSig in May. And Rob, you're the chair there. May?
Yeah, May 17, 18, 19.
From memory.
Yeah, we're adding Friday night workshops this year, but Call will have their forum.
All right. And if anyone has any questions about that, they can immediately email Robert Dykes at Sojo University. Is that what you're going to say? Okay,
yes.
Exactly.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you guys so much
for
today.
Thank
this
you.
has been wonderful. And thank you, everyone who's out there listening to us. Please tune in next time for one of our studio sessions or one of the interviews which we'll be conducting later on this year. You can also listen to Robert Dykes' interview several weeks ago of Rob Herschel at Sojo University in Kumamoto.
Writing feedback system. Yeah.
Writing feedback system. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.